For this video, you'll be learning how to graph scatter plots, and we're going to be graphing scatter plots in two different ways. The first way is going to be the good old-fashioned graphing it by hand, which is beneficial to kind of understand how to do. But then we're also going to be working with desmos and making sure that you know how to graph a scatter plot on that, because sometimes it's just going to be that you need to graph your points and just be able to see what the picture looks like. So that's beneficial as well, okay? So we're going to start with kind of where do scatter plots come from? Well, you're going to come up with a question, and so like if you're a statistics person, you'll come up with a question that you are interested in finding out. And so I came up with one, and I was like, okay, could you determine, okay, so can someone's height be known, or can you determine somebody's height if you know what their shoe size is? In other words, I'm trying to figure out, are those two things related in some way, okay? And so once you kind of determine your question, you're going to collect your data. And so the data that you're collecting to be able to make a scatter plot has to be numerical. It has to have a measure to it, okay? So notice somebody's height is a measure of how tall they are, and then their shoe size is kind of a measure of how big their feet are, okay? So I went out and I collected some data from a few people that I know. And then after you collect the data, you're going to organize the data. So you organize it. So notice I made a table out of it. And so, and then the other thing that I did is, because normally people will tell me their height in feet and inches, I went ahead and converted it all into inches. So that when I graph it, it's a little bit easier to graph, okay? I organized my data. So like a person that I asked had a shoe size of 11 and was 71 inches tall. Another person wore a size 8 and they were 68 inches tall. Another person had a size 2, so that was a kid. And they were 53 inches tall, so on and so forth, okay? So once you get your data and you've organized it at least a little bit, you can actually make your scatter plot. So to make your scatter plot, you're going to start by drawing your X and Y axis. And so notice I only drew the first quadrant, because if you look at your data, that data is positive, okay? And so I only needed to graph the first quadrant. And then you need to make sure you label it. So my X values were their shoe size. So on my X axis, I'm going to put shoe size. And then my Y values were their height in inches. So along my Y axis, I have to turn this a little bit sideways. That is their height in inches. Okay, so from there, you want to actually label your numbers. So to kind of organize that, notice I did not put this in any kind of order. And so you're going to have to kind of look at for the x-axis, you're going to have to look at your x values and find like maybe the lowest value and then where the highest one is. So for my shoe sizes, the lowest shoe size that I recorded was a shoe size of 2, and then the highest was 13. And so that's going to help you determine kind of what to go by for this. And so since it goes all the way from 2 to 13, I'm actually just going to go by ones on my x-axis. So this is 0, and then I'm going to go by ones all the way to 13, because that was my highest one. So I hope that I spaced this out well. Might have to extend it, but we'll see. Almost. All right, so I have to extend it just a bit more so I can fit all the way to 13. And now, if I had some that had even bigger shoe sizes, you could go by a number, like you could go by 2s, you could go by 3s, but I'm trying to get a good kind of picture here. All right, and then my Y values, notice these are bigger numbers, and there's not any that are really close to 0. In fact, my lowest height was the 53 inches. And so if your values start far away from 0, what you'll have to do in your graph is put a break in your graph. So a break just kind of looks like a squiggly line in a way. And what that shows is that you have skipped numbers at the very beginning, okay? And then you'll still have to decide on a scale, so you're going to still have to decide what to go by that would kind of show your data. But then from there, you at least have, you know, you don't have to write 1 through 50 to get there, all right? So the lowest that it goes is 53. The highest that my heights went was 74 inches. So those two, they're a little bit further apart, so you could go by 2s if you wanted to, just as long as you are able to show your data. So I might go by 2. So I'm going to start with 50, since it's kind of close to 53, and then I'm going to go by 2s until I get to 74. So this first one would be 50, and then I'm going to go by 2s until I get to 74. So that would be 52, 56, 62, 64, I might have to extend this one too, 68, 70, yep, I just didn't leave myself quite enough room, so if you need to extend yours, just extend it, not a problem. Sometimes we try to plan it out, but then we didn't quite plan it out well enough, all right? So then from there, all you have to do to graph your scatter plot is to take those coordinates, these are coordinates, so like this would be the coordinate 11, 71, and you're going to graph them on your graph that you just made. So I'm just going to go through and graph them. So the first one's at 11 and 71, so that one was one of my higher ones, so 71, and you're going to have to kind of approximate because when you're drawing it by hand, it's a little harder, and you could actually use a ruler if you wanted to, okay? Oh, that one is a little bit too far over, so move it just a bit over, okay? Then we have another one at 8 and then 68. So 8 and 68, that would be about right there. And then another one person had a shoe size of 8, but they were only 67 inches tall. So 8 and then 67 would be just underneath that one. And then 2 and 53, so 2, 53 would be about right there. And then 6 and 63, 6, 63 would be about right there. And so we're kind of approximating in a way. And then 13 and 74, so that was the tallest person, and that person happened to have the biggest shoe size too. And then the last one was 9 and 68. So 9 and 68, that would be actually level. Your scatter plot, and you've graphed all of your data, you can start looking at it and analyzing what the data tells you. And so that's what we're going to discuss in other videos, okay? So the other thing that I want to work on is how to use the Desmos app to do what we just did. So you would get your data, so I'm going to just put that table in the bottom, and then you pull up the Desmos app or pull it up on your computer. You'd hit that little plus sign in the side, you go to table, and you can enter your data that way. So I'm just going to quickly enter it in. So we got 11, 8, 8, 2, 6, 13, and 9. And then enter your Y values, 71, 67, and then 68. All right, and then just double check and make sure that you didn't mistype something, which is easy to do for everybody, really, if you're not careful. And then it will actually go ahead and graph it for you. Now, why do I not see it? Well, if you look at how far this graph is extended, it only goes to 10. So I can't see my values because notice these are really high. So what you have to do is either zoom out, so go over here and zoom out, or if you have like a little scroll on your mouse, you could scroll it and it'll zoom out for you. But then notice you can see your dots. Now, that's really close together. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to zoom in. Once you kind of see where they are, you're going to zoom in on that spot. So you can hit the zoom in button And then you just kind of grab the graph with your cursor and you move it where you need it. And that way you can see your data, and then you can analyze it just like you did by graphing it by hand. So that is how to graph a scatter plot.